Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone in Vietnam, and good morning in France. Welcome to this new session of the GEM Vietnam 2022 webinar series. So today we will be talking about energy and the question of the climate impacts on the energy system in Vietnam, both supply side and demand side. And for this very important session, we have the pleasure to welcome Dr. Levan Chon from IREETS and Dr. Nguyen Minh Bao from the Institute of Energy. They will be chairing this session with a presentation from Levan Chon, but also Viet Nguyen Thien from IREETS. So basically, you will all have 30 minutes to present the key results of the work you have been doing in this chapter 5 of our special COP26 assessment report. And then we will have a discussion with two outstanding discussants, Dr. Luang Tuan Ain from De Montfort University and Dr. Nguyen Anh Thuan from the Institute of Energy as well. And both discussants will share 30 minutes to present comments and points of discussion with the presenters. And at the end of this session, we'll have more time for an open discussion with the audience. In the meantime, the audience may ask questions or have comments directly in the chat, and I'm sure the authors and the presenters will do their best to answer those questions throughout the session. So without further introduction, I give the floor to Dr. Levan Chon. The floor is yours, Chon.
Okay, thank you very much for the introductions by Etienne. Now, I would like to share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we are going to present about the impact of the climate change on energy system in Vietnam. And this chapter was done by a group of us. And here in join today, we have Nguyen Minh Bao from Toulouse School of Economics, Nguyen Minh Bao from Institute of Energy, Nguyễn Tiến Việt from London School of Economics and IREETS, and Hồng Xuân Đỗ from Nam Long University. In this chapter, we are going to have three sections. The first section talking about the demand from the residential and industrial sector. And the second section talking about the hydropower generation. Because hydropower generation is one of the most important source of energy in Vietnam. And the third part talk about the energy system as a whole. So we are going to look at the first sections about the climate change impact on electricity demand. And in this section, we examine the two sectors, manufacturing sector, electricity consumption. And we use the data from the Vietnam Enterprise Surveys conducted by the GSO of Vietnam in 3 years, 2016 to 2018. And temperature projections is based on global circulation model. We use two systems of equation. The first system includes three cost share equations for the three factors of productions. They are labor, capital, and energy. And the second system of equation includes 5 cost share equations for 5 fuel sources. Then we use the second system in order to take into account the possibility of input substitution to minimize cost. It means that over the time periods when the price of one fuel go up, then firms tend to cut down that fuel consumed and then switch to other fuel that become relatively cheaper. And we find that as temperature increases, then firms are likely to spend relatively more on labor and energy and less on capital. Then if additional degrees Celsius will induce the median firm to consume 4.3% more on energy. And energy consumption among foreign and domestic privately owned firms is relatively lower than that in state-owned enterprises. It means that foreign and domestic privately owned firms are more efficient in energy consumption, while state-owned enterprises, they are less efficient. They tend to use more energy, probably because they use are not, outdated technology. And then about the residential sector electricity consumption, then we use data from Vietnam Household Living Standard Survey undertaken by GSO every 2 years from 2000 to 2018. And temperature projections also from the same models. And then in our model, we take into account not only the attributes at household and district level, but also we include temperatures and its quadratic terms. And we also estimate the second function in which we divide the temperature into 14 being in order to reflect the non-linear relationship. And then we see that at the median temperature of 24.8 degrees Celsius, then a 1 degree increase will increase the electricity consumption by nearly 5%. And household electricity demand rises at an increasing rate. The 14 being so that as it gets warmer, demand first falls and then goes up at temperature higher than 23 degrees Celsius. Because when it gets warmer, then the need for heating decreases. That's why the demand for electricity and energy in general falls. And then when the temperature gets higher, it becomes hotter. And then the need for air conditioning or cooling will increase. That's why the electricity consumption among households will increase. Okay, now I would like to introduce Nguyen Minh to present the second part about hydropower generation.
Thank you, Professor Chon. So
yeah,
may I
start my screen
now?
yeah.
Yeah, thank
okay.
you.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen for now?
Yes, very well.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so it's the next part. We'd like to discuss the impact of climate change on hydropower generations. So from the supply side, Vietnam has been largely dependent on hydropower. It is generally perceived as an affordable, adjustable, and sustainable power source. However, it is sensitive to the variations in the hydrological conditions, which in turn respond to the variability of weather factors such as rainfall or temperature. In this study, we aim to quantify the potential impact of climate change on hydropower generations in 6 large basins: the Lô Gâm Chảy, Ba Sê San, Chairs Prof, and Đồng Nai. They represent different climate zones and account for about 80% of national installed hydropower capacity. To do so, we collect a range of high-resolution data from different sources, including yes, we collect a range of data sources. For example, we include information about basin boundary, river network, elevation, soil, land cover, weather data, climate change scenarios, hydropower operation, and river flow. In terms of methodology, we combine a rainfall runoff model and a hydropower generation model. Our rainfall runoff model simulates river flows to hydropower dams given daily variations in weather factors. And the hydropower generation model translates the variation in simulated river flow into variation in power supply. Ultimately, our goal is to evaluate the impact of alteration of hydrological regime under changing climate. Our model do not include other factors such as aging process of existing turbines or maintenance, upgrade, restorations, or new plant or turbine sedimentation changes, or in soil profile, land use, or water conflict. Okay, so here are results. So after calibration and validation process, we use projected climate variables from 31 GCMs under 2 emission scenarios, RCP 4.5 and RCP 8.5, to simulate river flow and then hydropower production. To assess the impact of climate change, we compare the projected generation in baseline periods, 1999 to 2018, and the future periods, 2041 and 2060. So the impact is highly uncertain, with the sign being either positive or negative, depending on climate models and emission scenarios. The on-sample medians of 31 climate models report an increasing trend in own basins under both study RCPs, which is mainly driven by the increase in precipitation projected across the country by the mid-century. However, we find that climate change could induce climate change could induce more extreme weather events such as droughts and floods, and increase the seasonal variability of river flows. So hydropower generation could become more volatile. Our detailed analysis suggests that in many basins, climate change is likely to reduce discharge in the dry season, putting pressure on hydropower generation as an energy system. This calls for the contingency plan to avoid power disruption, adversely affecting firms' performance and household welfare. Meanwhile, climate-proofing engineering interventions could be considered to enhance the resilience of hydropower facilities in the face of higher risk of severe floods in wet seasons. Finally, as the impact of climate change tend to vary across basins, local monitoring is critical to provide early warnings, while regional and national coordinations and management could help spatially smooth out adverse consequences of climate risk. So let me turn to Professor Chon for the next part of our presentations.
Okay, thank you. Now we are going to present the third part about the assessment of the climate change impact on the whole energy system. And the objective of this section is to assess the impact of climate change on the energy system in Vietnam up to 2050 to propose adaptation measures in response to this impact. And we use an engineering model named LEAP model. And we use the BAU means business as usual scenario, and that is the future energy demand and electricity projections during 2017 to 2050 based on the Power Development Plan A. And here we assume that there are no impact of climate change and that the lack of additional policies. And then we have two climate change impact scenario that we compare to the BAU model. And we use data on power capacity, process efficiencies, capital costs, and operation and maintenance costs based on the Power Development Plan A. And temperature changes here based on the two scenarios, RCP 4.5 and RCP 8.5, and electricity demand. And rainfall changes and annual hydropower productions. We assume that carbon prices will be implemented in the evaluation period. And then we say that there are negative impact on electricity demand, and by the 2050. And electricity demand, you see that will increase around 2.8% and 3.2% compared to BAU by 2050 under the two scenarios. And electricity demand increases, resulting in the increase in the primary energy supply. And primary energy supply increased by 1.3% and 2.4% compared to the BAU scenario. And about the greenhouse gas emissions, from the power generation sector rose from 1.9% to 3.6% under CRP 4.5 and CRP 8.5 respectively. About the electricity generations, you see that electricity generation output from hydropower is expected to increase due to the increase in the rainfall under climate change scenario. Because as Dean Nguyen just said, that in the future, then there may be more flood or rainfall will increase, so it will facilitate more hydropower generation. However, this increase is negligible and similar in both scenarios, RCP 4.5 and RCP 8.5, and ranging from 0.04% to 0.13% of BAU electricity generation output during the period 2017 and 2050. Now about the assessment on the whole energy system accumulated for the period 2017 and 2050. See, the total cumulative additional increase of primary energy demand will be 60.6 million tons of oil equivalent and 108.7 million tons of oil equivalent by 2050 under the two scenarios. The increase in precipitation will drive an increase in electricity generation from hydropower, and then this will decrease other substitutes fuel used for power generation. The total cumulative decrease of other substitutes fuel will be small, just only 7.1 million tons of oil equivalents and 6.4 million tons of oil equivalents by 2050 under RCP 4.5 and 8.5 respectively. On the energy system aspect, the cumulative additional increase of primary energy demand will be 53 and 102 million tons of oil equivalents by 2050 under the two scenario. And this slide or this tape diagram illustrates the previous slide. About the emission from the power generations, you see that when we use more fuel for power generation, then it will increase the emission from the power sectors. But the decrease of other substitutes fuel used for power generation due to the increase in the hydropower generations will lead to the decrease of CO2 emission from the power sectors. And the accumulated additional increase of carbon dioxide emission will be 118.8 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent and 200.9.7 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2050 under RCP 4.5 and 8.5 respectively. About the social economic impact, the total cumulative cost of climate change impact on electricity demand under RCP 4.5 and 8.5 in this period are approximately 4.2 billion US dollar and 7.7 billion US dollar. The total cumulative decreased cost of climate change impact on hydropower productions under the two scenarios in the same period are approximately 1.1 billion US dollar and 0.95 billion US dollar. The decrease in hydropower social cost is smaller, and with respect to the energy system, the climate change impact will cause a significant increase in social cost, with a cumulative additional increase of 3.1 billion US dollar and 6.7 billion US dollar by 2050 under RCP 4.5 and 8.5. Now we talk about the adaptation measure in response to climate change. A cost-benefit analysis of the technological measure on electricity saving in cooling and lighting in residential sector and renewable energy development. The implementation of these technology measure will save 10.5 billion US dollar by 2050 and reduce nearly 3,000 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalents by 2050. And the abatement cost is greater than the cost. Here it means the investment cost and then greenhouse gas emissions caused by the impact of climate change on electricity demand. So the conclusion is that climate change increase the electricity demand, increase the fuel consumption, and cause and greenhouse gas emission in power generation. And then the good solution to mitigate climate change is to decrease the use of electricity and greenhouse gas emission through the promotion of electricity effective devices and renewable energy development. Okay, thank you for your attention. Okay, so on comment and questions are welcome. Thank you. Now I stop my share.
Thank you very much, Levanchon. And I suggest we move directly to the discussants. So I don't know who is supposed to start among our two discussants. So Chon, you tell me, huh? Chon, so who will start the discussion?
Yeah, the discussion here we have Lương Tuấn Anh and Nguyễn Anh Tuấn. So any of you can start first. So I would like to invite Lương Tuấn Anh, okay, to give your comment and question.
Good, thank you. And we start having questions in the chat as well. So please, you can comment or ask questions in the chat from the audience, and we will answer this in the last sequence of the webinar.
All right, so should I share the screen or let the moderator?
Yeah, you can share the screen.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, very clearly.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I think this is an excellent chapter because I'm very impressed with the breadth of the research that looks at both the demand and supply, the energy system. But I would like to see more work on the depth of the analysis. So I would clarify my points when I go along. So in this chapter, they look at the impact of climate change by the change in temperatures on both the demand and the supply of energy. So in the first section, they look at the relationship between temperatures and energy demand. So they find that high temperature contributed to the rise in energy costs. And more precisely, they find that like for every degree Celsius, the share of the energy cost would rise by about 0.0006 percentage points. And they also find that the hot weather reduce the cost of electricity and charcoal, but increase the cost of diesel and gas. So I want to make some comments on these points. The first thing is that they control for the firm characteristics, but I would like to see if like the impact of temperatures varies by those characteristics. So I want to see some interaction between characteristics and temperatures because for example, for the policymakers, they want to understand how these impact vary by firms and therefore can provide targeted support to the firms. I would imagine, for example, small firms will be more affected by the rise in temperatures than the big firm because small firms have less capital and then also have less capacity to respond to the change in temperatures. So that the firms can also be well prepared if they understand how the climate change affect them differently. So I would like to see a more analysis on these points. They also find that like temperature has a non-linear effect on energy consumption, which is good, but they also find that like the propensity to consume energy was higher with high temperatures. So it prompts the question of why the author did not consider the non-linear effect of climate change in the case of firms. So that is something I wanted the the authors to look into it and probably provide more insight or more result on this. For the second section, they look at the supply of energies. So they use two approaches. I think like in the presentation, the authors only present the first approach, which is based on some simulations. This approach is quite information demanding. There's another approach, which is the prediction-based method, and they use information about like hydrological condition and operation to predict the supply of energies. So my question is like, well, we probably are not expert in this kind of aspect, so we want to see like some more discussion of which approach is more applicable in the case of Vietnam, because we want to see like if we want to apply one of these methods, which one will be more appropriate. And also we want to see like some discussion on like the result of those two approaches. Are they reliable? Are they consistent? Which one will provide more reliable, more consistent results? So I think that is some like interesting thing that the author can provide us. And in the final section, they look at the impact of climate change across different scenarios. So they look at the business as usual. They look at the different temperature rises, RCP 4.5, RCP 8.5. My comment is like, how about the other climate changes, like the sea level rises or droughts? Because in my mind, those climate changes might affect the firms more than temperature. So imagine, for example, a firm who is located in an area where there are more droughts, and the firm will have to invest more to respond to the change in the environment, or in the droughts might affect their operations, and therefore they need to invest more. So probably those climate change will provide us more significant results, and I would like to see like those things in the analysis. So these are just my several comments on the chapters, and I think this is a timely effort to understand how climate change affects both energy demand and supply in Vietnam, because Vietnam is one of the countries that is most affected by climate change. And I would like to see more results from the analysis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nguyen, for your comment and questions. Probably I would like to invite the next discussions, Nguyen and Tuấn, to give your comment and questions too.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chon. Yeah, I would like to share my screen. Okay, now you can see.
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, thank you for inviting me to participate and to provide some discussion point on this very interesting study. The details, comments, and question was addressed to the author, and then through our extensive exchange with Dr. Bao, with Mr. Hung as a coordinator of that study, was we discussed some very detailed point, and then I think that my comment already sent to the author for the clarification, and I'm happy with that, but I will not go into detail of that. But let me share some kind of the thought on energy sector, particularly on the demand and supply in the long term in Vietnam. The study raised some very big concern for the energy specialists. That is uncertainty in the future. Regarding, I'm quite happy, and then I'm quite surprising to see such kind of study, very methodology based on very excellent methodology and approach. And of course, not all of that result is, I would agree with that, but I would think that this could be the very, very good result showing us, at least in terms of the uncertainty in very long term of our demand and our supply under the various impact like climate change, temperature rising. So let me share with you some point on the demand and supply in Vietnam. Okay, so looking forward on energy system in Vietnam, at least in perspective of the next 20 or even longer, as the author study have an outlook up to 2100 years. So we can, but at least for the medium term, we can boldly state that Vietnam energy demand is robust, increasing at least more than 5% over the next 20 years. That is energy demand. In terms of the electricity, it will increase much higher, but it's coupled with a quick structural transition and power expansion. With the abundance of renewable energy potential, the renewable energy in future will grow at a very exceptional pace to become one of the 4 pillars in the power generation in Vietnam. That is renewable energy, hydro, gas, and coal generation. In terms of the supply security, domestic energy supply sources are not sufficient. Delay in energy project could lead to energy and power shortage in medium and in long term. The increasing of energy import in the future will worsen energy security indicator in the future. And then we can see some lack of development on competitive energy market, energy price, and then market regulatory mechanisms are still underdeveloped or inadequacy. Sorry. So that is the main feature of the energy system. So in the past, on the left side of the screen, you may see that in the past, the energy consumption, primary energy supply in the Vietnam has increased from the 50 million ton of the oil equivalent to now nearly more than 90 million. And then on the right-hand side, you may see that even is based on the draft version of the Power Development Plan number 8. It gives us at least the perspective on the how would increase our demand in the future with a very, very high increasing rate. That would give us something to think about the supply and demand in the long term. In the long term, energy demand up to 2050 will increase substantially from currently close to 60 million ton of oil equivalent to more than 200. And then I just take 1 year of 2035 to make a balance between the supply and demand. You see that with our projection of the demand and then supply by 2035, our supply maximum from our projection is reached only 120 million ton of equivalent. So there are a big gap in the missing of the supply. It should be completed by the import of the fuel or LNG, and then we need to increase renewable energy like offshore wind, onshore wind, and solar. And of course, one of them is also the energy efficiency and conservation in order to provide a secure supply to satisfy the demand. Based on that, you see that there are a lot of it come up with the same conclusion from the author study, that is, there are a lot of the uncertainty for our future in terms of supply and demand balances. With that one, the energy sector emission will increase. This is based on the draft report of the National Climate Change Strategy. This is still ongoing, not the final results yet, but it shows us that emission will increase by more than 6% per year for the period up to 2030, and then by 2.5% per year for period after 2030. And among that, energy sector account for about 60 to 80% of total CO2 emissions. With that, our projection in the demand and supply, and then with the estimation of the energy sector emission, with the government of Vietnam objective to reach net zero emission by 2050. There are huge challenges ahead, and we need to elaborate the option pathway to this objective. And the study that carried out under the GEMS program, I think is serving the background information and background research study for such kind of to point out to us how the challenge ahead to elaborate the pathway to the objective of the net zero emission in Vietnam. We have also, from very macro level, we try to see that CO2 emission to get the objective to net zero emission by 2050. Energy sector must reduce 70% of its emissions in 2050. This is the huge challenge. It means that there are a lot of the option and pathway for energy sector. First, we need to do a transition to renewable energy and hydrogen. No coal-fired power plant after 2030. And then after 2035, we need to reduce gas-fired and eliminate all coal-fired. We need to introduce option on the CCS, carbon capture and storage. This, of course, this is still very preliminary report, and then based on the study by that under that workshop by Mr. Hung and Mr. Bao, would give us some clarification, some answer to our effort to make the pathway to net zero emission. So in the conclusion, I just would like to say that there are huge challenge ahead for energy sector to contribute to the net zero emission commitment of government of Vietnam. And then we have a lot of the ongoing activity to focus on the security, priority, and cost benefit analysis for the energy sector option and pathway to reduce CO2 emission. And I would like to stop at that point, and I would like to thank the author of that study. I'm sorry, I did not go into detail of the study because I made already a comment in the paper and exchange with the email for them. But I would like to thank the author for its contribution to the energy community, and then energy expert and energy sector for the clarified certain point and provide us some answer to that uncertainty and concern on the long-term supply and demand in for energy sector in Vietnam. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nguyen Minh, for your comment. Yeah. And now we move on to our group to answers. Now we feedback to some of your comments and questions. So about the first part about electricity demand, then Dr. Nguyen say he wants to see about the interactions of firm characteristics and temperatures. I think that that's a good idea, and we will take into account in our future research, because in this chapter, then we take into account firm characteristics and temperature, but we do not introduce the interaction terms. And next about the small and large firm, because you see that here we have two systems of equation. The first system of equation then examine the cost share of the three factors of production: labor, capital, and energy. And in this, the data for this very rich. It means that the sample size is big enough to run the regression. But for the second system equations, in that we examine the 5 fuel sources that a firm can use for their energy demand. And then not many firms in the survey, they are currently using 5 fuel sources. So the number of observations has decreased a lot. And this is like a major shortcoming of the data set. And that's why we should only can focus only state-owned enterprises and privately owned firms and foreign firms. And we have not compared between the small and large firms. And about the nominal effect of climate change in firm, we have not considered this, and probably we will consider it in the future. Okay, that's about the electricity demand. And about the electricity supply, now I'd like to invite Nguyen Minh. You have any comment or feedback to the discussion?
So thank you very much for Dr. Lương Tuấn Anh for the comments. And you already provide an excellent summaries of our methodologies to model the generation hydropower in Vietnam. So more specifically, in this study, we customize the methods for each basin, either using a process-based model or regression-based model to simulate hydropower generation. And we use a process-based model where information is more complete. The coordination between existing dams is well known, and the assumption on maximizing power generation under constraints is plausible. However, it's not always the case. So in this study, we apply the process-based model for Đồng Nai, Sê San, and Chairs Prof basins, and we use a regression-based model for other basins. And given our selection of the model and for each basis, our generations, our hydropower generation models performance is good or very good for all basins at a monthly step in our validation process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nguyen Minh. And now I would like to invite Nguyen Minh Bao Do you have any feedback or comment? Okay, anh Bảo, are you there?
Okay. So let me explain about the what is a BAU. For our modern, firstly, we set up the energy system based on the PDP power development plan number 8. So with assuming that there is no any change change on the climate. So and then based on that, we set up the climate change scenario. With assume means that there is something change on the look like temperature rising and on and changing in rainfall and so based on that we can estimate the impact of changing in the increase in temperature and the change in rainfall, and then we can estimate the impact of climate change on the energy system. Because we set up the BAU for the energy system and any change in the energy demand and power wind result in the changing in the power generation and primary energy supply. So based on that, we can estimate the changing in electricity demand will result in the changing in the power generation. That means electricity demand increase will result in the increase in power generation and the more fuel consumption for power generation. That lead to the CO2 emission increasing from power generation. Yeah. So and any more question?
Okay, thank you, Nguyen Minh Bao. Now I would like to invite anh Nguyễn Tuấn Anh, Dr. Nguyễn Tuấn Anh to answer the questions about the non-commercial energy in Vietnam supply. And this is part of your comment and feedback. Dr. Nguyễn Tuấn Anh.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, because Nguyễn Anh Tuấn, I think another. Yeah. So I think that there are some two questions that maybe we will take on. The first one is non-commercial energy in Vietnam. That is those we call it sometimes a traditional energy. That means the charcoal, the wood, and then there are those energy that use mostly for cooking purpose with those exchange in the market. In that sense, you see what I mean, and that was represented a substantial share in our energy balances, energy supply. In hydro source in the supply, yes, that is hydro is included in the supply. That was included in the renewable energy. That was included in the renewable energy. And then the third question about the energy transition at the beginning. Currently, yeah, we have a lot of the activities, not only at the Institute of Energy, but at the various institutions and think tank and then NGO carrying out the energy transition at the beginning, at the very beginning. From the experience in Germany and other countries, we think that very important is that the institutional framework and then the regulatory framework and the somehow this is I mean that incentive mechanism in order to promote energy transition. Because energy transition at the beginning involved a lot of the causes, because the new form of energy change to the new technology is always more expensive than the other than the later. So we need to do a transition, energy transition at the with a very clearly based on the set of the policies. I would like to invite the participant to have a look at the paper we published in the Energy Journal website in Vietnamese, where we identified that for the energy transition in Vietnam, we need to base into the 3 pillars. And within that 3 pillars, we elaborate the 87 policies to promote at the beginning, to at the medium term, and then sometime in the short term, medium term, to improve to start the energy transitions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nguyen Anh Tuấn. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Etienne, say that Dr. Nguyen Anh Tuấn, can you share your paper or your figure in the screen?
Yes, maybe if I may add a comment on. So thanks a lot for your discussion and comments, Dr. Nguyen Anh Tuấn. I think it's extremely useful that you show us a picture of the new energy future as it is currently discussed for Vietnam. As you know, we worked in this COP26 report based on the previous energy mix scenarios of Vietnam, so the PDP-8, and it certainly now needs some updates. Part of these updates are based on what you presented in your discussion, and it's I think one key point maybe that could be discussed maybe now, or I would like to have your opinion on that. It is that, so Vietnam announced this very ambitious COP net zero horizon, and you mentioned how transformative this is for the energy sector and the rest of the economy. But for the energy sector, do you consider to analyze both the change in the mix, the energy mix, and the potential impacts, because we know there will be climate damages anyway, some climate damages. Do you intend to try to address both adaptation of the energy system to climate impacts and the mitigation side together at some point? Or for now, in your analysis, do you consider them separately? So that would be my question for Dr. Nguyen Anh Tuấn.
Okay. Merci, Etienne. Yes, I see clearly that your question, because regarding how we do the exercise to modeling of our energy system in the future. That is, frankly, currently we do is as static modeling. I know that what you see what I mean. This is not dynamic. This is not the general equilibrium model, something like that. So clearly we see there a gap in terms of analysis of the feedback of the chain of the option and measure we introduce to reduce our energy consumption or whatever. To be brief, we do analysis projection, without explicit and implicit integration of the feedback interaction, but we tried our best to incorporate it into that through the various parameter and options, and it always have we always consider there are some certain limit in terms of the exactitude, and then in terms of the uncertainties. That's why the question from one of our discussant that I don't know what he said. One of before he put a question about whether this approach is better or not better than other one. I would say that from the modeling point of view, very difficult to say that, and usually you cannot say that this is better, this is the best option. Usually we can say that we, based on our experience, we use that model, and then it gives us as a such kind of answer with some limitation related with that modeling system or with that approach. So that's why one of the questions that I'm quite interested in your study, that is the temperature raise and how the impact on the demand. It's not only impact on the demand, it impact also on supply side, particularly for the renewable energy. When we rely on our not only hydro, but solar and wind, and that was without answer, no answer yet for the time being.
Actually, the literature on the climate impacts on energy supply is quite scarce generally, not just Vietnam, but globally. And usually people are doing what we have been doing, that is looking at the hydro sector mostly. But we don't know what would be the impact on other parts of the energy supply side, and this is there are very few studies. It's very hard to have good estimates of the potential impacts on the other parts of the energy mix, but also on the network itself that could be also at risk in the face of some climate events.
Yes, that's true. But because this is very difficult to do such kind of exercise.
But for this year, yeah.
For Vietnam, for example, we have a collaboration with IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, to do the input-output modeling for the impact of the nuclear power program for Vietnam. It was before the 5 years ago, before the government and then the National Assembly to decide to postpone it, our nuclear power plant program. We have that study, and then that was one of the very rare study to do to look at the impact in terms of employment, in terms of the import and export balances, in terms of the taxes for the whole country. That only the study I know, and then I participate in that one as one of the leading author for Vietnam. But unfortunately, there are very few other study to do this kind of the impact of the development. For example, now everybody talk about renewable energy. Yes, renewable energy is been take a substantial share in our future supply and to provide a lot of the supply to electricity. But what would be the real impact? We can somehow make some estimation, but such kind of a detailed study, I'm happy to see if anybody to carry out that one, and I'm happy to participate in that kind of study if we can organize a team.
Yeah, I think that's part of the plan for the end of the project. So I will come back to you with, about this. Thank you very much. I leave the floor to Chon for there are further questions or comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Agent and Dr. Nguyen Minh, for your very instructive comment and feedback segments. Now I would like to invite the audience to have further comment and questions about chapter 5. No, probably.
I think there was one from at the beginning from Arnaud Dubrac. I don't know if he's here anymore, but yeah, saying that actually the impact as we measure it is relatively low compared to BAU demand growth, which we can say it's true. As it is measured in the chapter, the impact is relatively low on the demand side. And on the supply side, there is this ambiguity of the precipitation effect of climate change that brings some positive impact on the supply of hydropower at some points in the future. So I think what the chapter says basically is that this is the first study, and there's a need for a broader overview of the potential impacts. But on the demand side, as it is measured, there is a real impact, but relatively low compared to the demand growth. And there is an ambiguous impact on the hydro supply side. Did we answer all the questions in the chat?
Yeah. Oh, one more.
No. Thank you. Thank you, Arnaud.
Yeah.
Mein Hong, you wanted to speak? Maybe
about energy transition. Yeah, Mein Hong.
Yeah, so there is a question by Tang Liu on the energy transition in Vietnam. So I think one of the key points for, and maybe very difficult for energy transition, that it could generate a huge cost for the country. For example, it is costly to change from coal plant into solar plants to use the renewable energy. But in the future, it can generate financial saving for the country. When the demand for renewable energy increase. So how about the optimal investment for the early stage for the country? I think maybe the private-public partnership would have to remove some first barrier. So for example, the enterprise, public and private, can create some sustainable job to support green growth, for example. And this investment from both private and public can use it to invest for new technology. So mainly for the carbon reduction and clean energy substitutes. So that is I think that one of the mechanism for transition.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Nguyen Minh Bao, for your comment. Okay, so are there any other questions and comments?
No, to answer Arno's question, that's clearly one issue that we haven't dealt with. Looking at this would actually require different kind of model than the one we used. It will require a more detailed, geographically detailed map of the network as it works, with basically all the detailed data on the capacities of the different power plants, so that we can assess what would happen if the infrastructure at some point is impacted by a climate event. So we thought about it at the beginning, between analyzing the impact on the trajectory of the energy mix, or analyzing the more potential short-term impact of an extreme event. And we chose to go in the direction of the energy mix and not the infrastructure impact. But this is clearly one aspect that we haven't investigated in the chapter, and that surely need specific studies and adaptation measures. If there are no more questions, I will basically thank the chairs of today's webinar. So Dr. Levanchen, thank you very much, and Dr. Nguyen Minh Bao as well, and the presenters. So Dr. Nguyen Thien, and our two very excellent discussants, Dr. Leong Tuan Ain and Dr. Nguyen Ain Tuan. I think this specific session on energy is really the beginning of further investigations that are needed, especially in the face of the ambitious announcements of Vietnam towards net zero horizon, and the whole transition in a just way. So it's only the beginning, but it's also the first attempt at having a comprehensive study of the impacts on the energy system for Vietnam. So again, I thank you all. Thank you also to the audience for the lively discussion. This sequence on sectoral climate impacts webinars will continue next week. Next week we will talk about the agricultural sector, and more specifically rice, and the impacts of climate change on this sector and on rice in different respects. So please tune in next week. The adventure of this long webinar series of GEM Vietnam continues, and have all a nice evening or day, depending if you are in Vietnam or in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Etienne. And thank you very much from the audience for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yeah, goodbye. Yeah.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Salut Etienne.
Thank you, anh Tuấn.
Chào. Cảm ơn anh Sơn.